going on, Sooner Nation? Thank you all for tuning into another episode of the Barry and Mack Show. As always, myself, Barry, personal trainer, sports performance coach out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And alongside me, former Sooner wide receiver, 2000 national champ, Mr. Damian Mackey. How are we doing today, DMack?
Good to see you, B. I'm excited, man. I love making time to do this. I'm excited about summer.
Mm.
I got a couple of the boys reached out to me and was like, "Bro, you brought back memories." They were literally like, "Don't forget to speak about this. Don't forget to speak about that." So,
Okay.
yeah, it. I think it was one of those trial by fire situations. Every summer, the new kids on the block would come in, and we would all be paying attention to see if they could make it because summer was going to test your manhood in ways you never had them tested before. So excited to have this conversation and continue down the 4-part series of
Yeah,
talking
man.
about summers.
That's right. 4-part series that we're doing here on the Barry and Mack Show. First one, we gave a lot of precursor, a lot of prerequisite kind of info, right? When you get to Oklahoma, winter, the transition from Prince to Schmitty, the changing of the guard, what that was like. But now we are specifically talking about summer because it is summer. And we feel that it is very apropos, germane to where the Sooners are at right now. But before we get started, want to let everybody know the Barry and Mack Show brought to you by OU Insider. Go to ouinsider.com, grab yourself a membership. DMack did a live stream last night with Parker Thune. Now, apologies for the audio. Some people said it was low. I listened. I actually thought it was okay. There were parts, but even with the audio, it is still worth the listen. Go check it out if you haven't yet. But make sure you are watching every episode of the Barry and Mack Show. If you're not on YouTube, go listen. Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get podcasts, it is available. But let's not waste any time, DMack. We're going to hop right into it. Summer with the Sooners. And we may go back, first summer, second summer, that kind of deal, talk a little bit. But I actually want to lead off with asking you a very specific question. And, and maybe pull this up here, make sure we got the notes. I want to ask you, in all your times, summers at Oklahoma, what is the absolute most impressive thing that you have seen? And then we will start this dialogue.
Uh, I saw some impressive things. I saw some freaks of nature. I often speak about Andre Woolfolk in a lot of ways. Derek Strait and Mike T, just freakish. D Strait, to see his agility and his balance was just ridiculous. His COD, the way he get in and out of his hips. Mike T was a guy who was, I think, 10'5", 10'6" guy in high school and just very athletic. He was hippie though. If you get Mike T in his hips, you can have him
Get
running
them.
one way while you running that way. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Most impressive thing I saw though was Tommy Harris. Tommy Harris comes in, um, and I'm gonna tell you too, because Perk also Perk did something. I was like, wow, Antonio Perkins. But this is what Tommy did really impressed me because it's the '01 summer. We're coming off a natty. Obviously by that, like, what I'm saying, we know what a summer is like. It was all business that summer. We were working our tails off. I actually got in trouble that summer, but we talked about on the last pod, gassers. And in high school, we would do 2 trips and 3 trips. And 3 trips were really hard in high school. And like I said, we'd run 4, one for each quarter, right? We get to OU and we're running 12. And in summertime, it's like receiver DB time is 28. Yeah, 7, 7, 7. Yep. So receiver DB time is 28. Running backs are 31. And
Okay.
then O line, D line. O line, I mean D line might be like 34. O line might be like 35, right?
Right.
And so D line's time is 34. Receiver DB time is 28. And every once in a while Schmitty would be like, hey, if this person beats that person, there's something in it for you He would create
The
competition,
mix. That's cool. Yeah.
and yeah, and so Tommy was talking smack, like he could run with us, and Tommy was a freak. I'm talking about in terms of like agility, speed. Tommy's like
Mm,
we don't let Tommy chase you. You got to run your fastest. Big lineman, you can just kind of wiggle and whatever. Tommy Harris, you couldn't do that. Well, we're in the middle of summer, and again, summer is a period where like you're in tip top shape. Like I felt like I could do anything during summer. Schmidt's receivers, if or it was receivers and DBs. If Tommy Harris beats you, you got an hour on a stairmaster, and you got to run extra. And we like, man, get the F out of here. Like, so we talking smack like, Tommy, you fast. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You fast for a lineman. Like, bro, don't get it. He a 3 technique. Watch out, bro. Like, we like, Smitty, you disrespecting us. Listen, Tommy beat about 4 receivers
get out of
and about four
town.
and about 4 DBs. And it was a full out
Wow.
sprint. And it was a full out
Yeah.
sprint. Tommy probably beat 7 receiver and DBs. No, damn well he wasn't beating us. But it was clear. Tommy was probably, and I don't know what he ran in his 40 for pro day, but I bet he ran 4.6 flat or something like that because
Hmm.
Barry, he was hauling ass. And you know this because you're a strength and conditioning guy. How you get into the cut and out of the cut is all the
Yeah.
difference in the world. You got to
Hmm.
prep to get to that line. You got to kind of step a half a yard from it, lean. You got to sway your hips, and you got to be able to do it in one
Yeah.
motion. You got to get it into your hip, get out your hip. Tommy was doing it like that. And that's generally what you'll beat. That's what we would beat the running backs. Q could do it with us, but even the running backs could not get into and out of the cuts like a receiver or a DB could.
Yeah.
Listen, Tommy was in them things and Tommy was getting those knees up. It was the most amazing thing to see a man that big. He had his shirt off, he had no fat, he had no man boobs, and he was just a bigger, thicker version of us. He's 6'3",
Yeah.
and rolling. I'm talking about Tommy was I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't just like a straight line, or it wasn't just like bag drills. You had to run, get to the line, get into the cut, get out of the cut.
Yeah.
And to see him do that, brother, I was like, he's the NFL dude as a freshman. By the way, this is his first summer.
Man. Yeah, and he came in like he wasn't light by any means. Like
No.
he definitely put on kind of that grown man weight, right? It wasn't bad weight. He didn't really kind of heft up until he got to Chicago, right?
Yes.
That's when he had to get to that kind of NFL body but man, when he was at Oklahoma, the cover he did on Sports Illustrated, like that is a rocked up Tommy Harris. He is well put together. And you're right. He is a guy who typically, when you get guys who are three techs or guys who play right over the center, they are players who the they've got maybe really thick trunks, right? But their mobility is lacking. They are maybe their leg length. I mean, we're getting into like femur and tib length and all this stuff, but it's not quite the dimensions of a speed guy. But then occasionally you get a Tommy Harris, a Miles Garrett, right? A JJ, a guy who is just a bigger human, right? As you said, I like the way you put that. He's just a bigger version of you. He's he's a guy who he can do all of the same things. He just weighs 100 more pounds.
and
That
is and is the biggest, most immaturest. I mean, he's not immature like in life, but Tommy is
sure.
the biggest prankster. And you like, it's not fair because like, bro, stop, because Tommy's so strong. Tommy's the strongest guy on the team. Tommy throwing up 225 like it's 140, like it's 135.
Yeah.
Tommy throwing it like this. And yeah, to see him do that as a pup, you know,
Mm,
it impressed us. The only thing that I'll say that comes close is when freshmen would have come in. Um, so that recruiting, this is now the 2000 recruiting class. It's Mark Clayton, it's Antonio Perkins, it's Will Peoples, it's Atelio Ford, and then
okay.
there was a kid from Jinx, like something Cumby or so, I forgot his name, but he didn't stick around. He came in with Matt McCoy, but They all come in separate. And so I'll never forget Mark comes in, like pulls his pec the first week. We're like, oh, this kid ain't gonna make it. Go figure.
Yeah.
Mark becomes, one of the all-time greats. Atelio comes in. Atelio's a track guy. I think he was a 48 quarter mile guy. So he, legit.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
never ran a 48.
Yeah.
Um but Atelio lacked a little bit coming out of high school in the COD part. He wasn't as fluid as the rest of us. Willie P comes in. His name's Will Peoples. Willie P 6'1", 175, and he's got some juke and jam. I think he ran like a 4.61, 4.58 his first freshman 40, which is not bad, right? But Willie came in, we immediately little broed him because he wasn't ready yet, right? So he's not, I mean, no.
Yeah.
Like that's every you all,
Yeah.
man, I told you my story as a freshman, right? Like I
Yeah.
get it, right? The story I told last week about my freshman. Now I'm 3 years into the program. I can do 225 10 times. I can rep it. I can do 250. So whatever.
Yeah.
Antonio comes in.
Okay.
So I want to say we had weights at like 11. And again, Schmidt was always my guy. If I didn't, and Edmund generally didn't want to be with the offensive guy. So Coach Ed was generally like with Roy and Mike T and D Straight, Ante, right? Like they were. Schmidt would generally be with us. Me, Dre, Jay Norm didn't usually rock with us. It would be like me, Dre, Savo, whatever, right? Schmidt's like DMack, and I was like, "What's up?" He was like, "It's a kid. He coming to take your spot." And yeah, I'm like, "Man, shut up." He's like, DMack, 39 and a half inch vert.
Mm-hmm.
He said kid can jump out the gym. He said he ran 4.38 40. He ran a four or no. He ran a 3.9 5.10 5. And he said, "Who's a starting slot receiver?" Well, this is this is what this is what Smitty said. Smitty always talking shit. Smitty gonna talk. That's what to this day. Smitty gonna
Oh
have
man,
something funny
that's
to say.
funny, man.
And I was like, "Oh yeah." He said, "DMack, he's stronger than." He didn't say he was stronger than me. I think he probably benched 225 like 4 times, which is I gotta
Okay,
tell you,
that's good.
that's good, man.
That's
That's for a
enough.
freshman. Yeah,
That's enough.
I
That's
couldn't
enough.
do it. I wasn't
Yeah.
doing it for sure. Nah, but Perk came out and Perk made it through. He couldn't do, and we'll talk about it today, right? So
Yeah.
we would cycle through four primary um, apparatuses, I guess. I'm trying to use your terminology.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You good?
the hill was a staple of summer, okay, and that's the
Okay.
duck pond. The
Got it.
ramps were a staple of summer, all right,
Okay.
and those are the stadium ramps on the east. All right, we got this north end zone and south end. Are we east and west or north and south? I don't be remembering.
Oh, the stadium is north
We're
south.
north and south. So the
Yeah.
north end zone ramps, which I don't know if they're still there. I'm sorry, the south end zone ramps, right by the locker rooms. I don't even know if those ramps are still like that anymore, but back then it was a monster. So
Okay.
we would have hills, we would have trippers,
Okay.
six, and I'm gonna go into details about trippers today.
Yeah.
We'd have ramps and then we'd have track, right?
Okay.
I mean, so those were really the four staples. Like Antonio wasn't strong enough to do like the sleds. When we would do sleds in the stadium or we would do
Mm-hmm.
sleds on the hill, it was already hell for us, and those guys would die. When we would do ramps, just like the strength you had to have in your glutes and your hamstrings to go up those ramps, and it was a sprint.
Yeah.
The way Schmidt did it, it ain't you got to sprint. He could do stadiums,
Yeah.
which
Which
also
that's the
hurt.
difference. He could probably do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah.
but those ramps, those things were killer.
Mm-hmm.
But he could hang when we would run 100. He could hang when we would run three trippers, four trippers, which are gassers.
Just straight
And
speed.
so,
Yeah.
but the other guys, like Schmidt, would have them at 3 o'clock, right? Because he didn't
Mm.
want anybody that was going to mess up the chemistry. If you can't make the times, you can't stay in the
Yeah.
group. And so,
Wow.
and so the walk-ons and the preferred guys and freshmen, that was the whole thing. Like they had to be able to cut the mustard. If you can't make it, you got to go at 3. They don't want anybody giving anybody else the idea that, oh, it's okay to miss times. No, you're out of there. Antonio, he could make it about half of the stuff. And I mean, he came in faster than me. Antonio was faster than all of us his freshman year. Antonio could jump 40 inches. Dre was probably the
Yeah.
only other guy jumping 40 inches. Antonio just was not a receiver. He was a better athlete in high school. He found a home on defense, and the rest is history.
which, man, I want to talk about the vertical piece. And so the two things that kind of pop out when you say that. One, we touched on in the last episode, who is playing so much of that is set in the summer, man. If you're not with those A groups, if you're not doing, a lot of people will say in season, right? Why isn't so and so playing? Give that freshman a shot. And in some cases, as you know, it's true, right? In some cases, a guy had a good summer, but for whatever reason, he's just low on the depth chart. Maybe it's the chalk, whatever. Man, if you are not hitting the bare minimums, I don't care what you did in high school, the game is so physical when you take that step up that you just can't hang. You're just not strong enough. It is a child going to arm wrestle grown men, and you just can't do it. Right? It's just not going to happen. But his jump cuts and his ability, talking about Perkins, to navigate when he returned punts, right? One of the things, so there are great 1 foot jumpers and there are great 2 foot jumpers. Great 1 foot jumpers are really good with getting leverage. A lot of times they can get a lot of speed into the jump, but those aren't necessarily the guys who make the best defensive backs. That was actually one thing that, oh man, who was it? Maybe it was Jaden Davis that he just wasn't quick enough off 2 feet to have some bound and get up, right? Also, it was one of 25's problems, I thought, just to hit the ground, get back up off the ground, but then also have some pop in that. When you are jumping 40 inches and you are an explosive jumper off of 2 feet, very important, not 1 foot, off of 2 feet, you are now in the crazy accelerator camp where those guys can hit the gas differently than a
Mm,
guy who is a 34, 35. There you go. So those are the kind of guys where you like, why isn't he creating separation there? Why isn't he breaking ankles? Why is that he can't get to the corner? Because you're not at full speed, right? That is a how fast can you hit the gas? Guys who are great 2 foot jumpers very oftentimes tend to be the best at that. That they are,
mm.
if you're not doing that, you're probably not explosive enough, right? Derek Strait had a pretty killer 2 foot jump, if I remember right, and he
38
was
and a half.
38 and a half.
Dog.
Okay, so he's also a guy who could, maybe he was very fluid in the hips, but he could break on a ball really, really well. He could get off the line of scrimmage really well. And so much of that is how much power you can express in an instant, right? 1 foot jumper guys, they need a build up. They need a runway. 2 foot guys like a Perk, like a Derek Strait, totally different kind of deal. I want to go in now, and this will lead us into some of our other questions that we got down the road. Let's start breaking down kind of the way summer looked from a, week 1, week 2 kind of deal, and go into how some of those exercises, some of that selection that you talked about earlier was utilized. How was that leverage, right? How did maybe the ramps and the duck pond look a little different in those later weeks? How did maybe some of the lifts that you were doing, how did they look early on versus later on? And then as we do that, maybe touch on a few stories of yourself kind of early on in the summer and then later on in the summer. Just some things that you remember.
Yeah, I spoke to it the last piece, the first 3 weeks for prep, and we didn't think about it then, but those were absolutely designed to manage injuries, because once we got through those 3 weeks, the entire summer was designed to make you do something every week. Every week you had to put your body through something that it had never done before, right? So
Mm,
at the end of week 3, we would test and we'd run hundreds. We do 4 trippers. We even did it with the sleds on the hill, and we would do the ramps, right? And so at the top, I'll just use ramps for an example. At the top of the ramp, you'd have Coach Bird, you'd have Coach Dawson, you'd have Coach Ed, you'd have Mark Hill, which was a new up and coming strength coach, and then you'd have Schmidt. Schmitty would be down there with us, and then he'd run up with us, but he wasn't sprinting, right?
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
when you get to the top, uh, Coach Ed or one of the coaches are on the clock. And so when I make my time, let's say, Coach Bird and Coach Dawson have deep receivers, and then Coach Hill and Scotty Volak, Scotty was there too, have DBs, they all have a chart. And so, 31, 32. And so when they see you go up the hill, they write your time. So Mackey got a 32, right? So that's my baseline. This is so right. We go through the 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and then we get through the week 3, and then we run these baselines. Right, we're running hundreds with sleds, and I gotta tell you, they had to switch it because, sorry, Roy's stronger than me. If Roy can push a sled with a 45, biologically, I can't. I can't run with a sled 100 yards with a 45. Sorry. So
Yeah.
like they really got mad at us, but we were trying our best, and I'm 183. Roy's 216.
Totally different.
It's just different, right? So they put 25s on ours, and we started there. Um,
Interesting.
but you run, and you got 16 seconds with the sled to hit 100 yards, right? So if you don't get out, don't even try. If you don't, anything we did, those first 10 yards, you already knew who wasn't going to make it because they didn't get out. We never
Mm,
did an exercise where you could coast in. If you got really good, you could coast to finish because the time, whatever the time was, if you were so ahead, you could kind of coast in to finish, and we learned how to do that. But you could never. I can't think of one thing we did where it's like get out kind of 75. No, you got to get out, and then you got to learn how to run. But we're running ramps. I run a 36, right? Coach Bird writes a 36 down. The next week when I get my chart, my ramp time is now at 35. So psychologically you're like, yo, last week I ran my hardest. Like I want you like this was the psychology we would have.
yeah.
Like, you're like 35, like I gave everything I had and I got a 36. Or you're doing bench, and generally one day out of the week we do a superset or we do a burnout, right? And so
Okay.
your
Yeah.
burnout, you'd
I like
start at
that.
185, you'd start at then you go to 205, and then we would get to 225. By my third summer, my burnout was a 225. I think I even did like 16 reps, 14, 15 or 16 my junior year. I never got a chance to make it to my senior summer. Um, but imagine you're doing your burnout on 205, and I burn out 21. And then the next week, my burnout's like, you got to do at least 24. You know what I'm saying? It's like, bro,
Jeez, man.
I just gave everything. How am I gonna? So every
Yeah.
week you like, I gotta go figure it out, right? And so boom, next week comes, we're doing, and I'm gonna tell you some of the psychology, and it's kind of gonna give it away. But the next week we got ramps, and it was interesting, Barry, because, and I don't remember names per se, but if one of the guys who played with me reminisces, they'll remember this. There were just some guys who would mentally like not try. So in other words, I had a
Okay.
36 last week on ramps. This week I got a 35, which means everybody had a time that they knew they had to beat, right? And some guys, they would just not get out. And it would immediately tell us like, oh, they don't think they can make their time. You know what I'm saying? Versus us, who the majority of us would be like, I got blind faith. And you know what I'm saying? Like I got blind faith. I'm just gonna
Wow.
try my best. And
Yeah.
it's me against the clock. And that's why you love guys like Brandon Average. That's why you love guys like D Straight. Again, I was that guy on the receiver side. And we would, we all on the ramps together, by the way, jockeying for position. It's like running a 400 because the ramps, they go like this as they go up. Does that make sense? The ramp goes like this. So the inside
Yeah.
lane runs less. The outside lane has to run farther, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you get behind the pack, you have to you kind of have to let them win unless you're willing to go around everybody. So there's psychology and there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff going on,
Yeah.
and you gotta listen. It's kind of you gotta be kind of crazy. So, come on, y'all, let's go. DMack, where you at? D Straight. Hell no. I mean, like, we had to get each other excited and our adrenaline rushing because it was designed to beat you. And so, boom,
Mm.
Barry, next week. you make your times, right? So you got 4 ramps, you got to do 35. Or maybe it'd be like 2 at 36, 2 at 35, whatever
Okay.
the case may be.
Yeah.
You got, man, I made it. So you excited, you exuberant. By the way, you can't move for an hour. You got booty lock. Like when we ran ramps, guys would stay at the top for like 30 minutes at the end because you'd have like your whole ass would just be cramped. Like
Glutes,
for real,
hamstrings all
your
day.
glutes are
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
It's you don't even know, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so so imagine we would train Monday, Tuesday. We'd have a midweek break on Wednesdays. By the way, I got into a whole argument with somebody like, bro, how you forget, dog? We only did 4 days in summer. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday you're off, Thursday, Friday, right? So imagine Friday was ramps
Okay.
and you had a 36, 36, 35, 35. What do you think we're thinking about on Monday? Or what do you think we're thinking about Sunday night?
What that time's gonna be.
Oh, bro, it's the worst. Sunday
Yeah.
nights were the worst day of the week because you got a whole week. You don't know
Yeah.
what Schmidt's gonna do, and you're like, "What are my times gonna be? What are my what are my weights gonna be?" You know what I'm saying? Like you don't know. You're like, "Oh God,
Interesting.
what?"
And there's
Yeah.
anxiety in that, man.
Oh,
That is programming and psychologically, can you handle it?
100%. Listen, guys would like some guys would quit,
Uh-huh.
and like in the middle of summer, they would literally be there week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, and week 5 is generally the second hard week because the first 3 weeks are easy, and they would
Yeah.
just leave. You wouldn't see them for the rest of the summer, and then like you said, year 4, you come back for fall camp. So the ones are in place. The twos are the guys who couldn't beat the ones. The threes are the freshmen, the ballyhooed freshmen, the blue chips. Those guys, they want to give those guys reps. You're a
Yeah.
four. You're a four. And
Man.
you saw it happen to a lot of guys. After 5 weeks, a guy who comes to mind, by the way, good guy. His name's Ron Brose Jones, a kid from Oklahoma. By the way, apparently he was a really good player in high school. He summer would kick his ass. And I don't think he
Yeah.
ever made it through a summer. And because he never made it through a summer, he literally never even got a chance to see if he could play because, you know, that summer psychology, bro, it was
Yeah.
real.
They got to know you can be counted on. You bring up a good point too, kind of with the weights and with the times. Here's a thing that I'll see a lot. Instagram, some high school team or some college team will post like a lift getting done or a drill getting done, and sometimes it doesn't look like the way people would be exercising in the gym, right? With like perfect form, everything looking all well put together. And this kind of harkens back to what we touched on beforehand, and a perspective shift, right? I'll even see occasionally Sooner fans maybe see something posted, and OU is pretty good with it. They don't post really any bad looking lifts like some universities do. They'll post like some ugly squats, some very like high squats, right? That people are like, he didn't hit depth. The first thing you hear is like, he didn't hit depth. Uh, but I'm like, say powerlifting, dog. But we got to remember that you're dealing with one, high level athletes, and high level athletes are incredible compensators. So not only are you trying to make them better performers, you're literally trying to see who has the best strategy for figuring it out, because that guy is probably going to be a guy who we want on the field. If he can figure this out, and this is way tougher mentally than what's going to go on in a game. This is week long or weeks long. You're going months of literal psychological warfare. If you can handle this, we're going to want to go into battle with you. And as long as guys are kept relatively safe, right? A little inside baseball, like whenever I'm looking at a guy lifting or looking at a guy running, be like, well, why aren't you fixing that? Or sometimes you got to let young athletes kind of figure out how to move instead of overcoaching. Overcoaching also happens. But unless there are more than 2 to 3 threats where it's like, oh man, that really looks like shit. We need to bail on this thing for a little bit. Unless that is the case, sometimes you got to let guys figure it out.
You
And
sound
that
like
kind
Schmitty.
of and that but there is value in that, because you got to remember that you're not coaching lifting, you're coaching football.
Facts.
You're preparing guys to do a sport where their bodies are going to be in positions that aren't like the optimal bench press position where your chest is up, you got those shoulders retracted, and you're ready to go. You might end up, you know, getting your ass clocked on a play, or you're in some scrum, man, and somebody rolls over your knee, and all of a sudden that crummy looking squat that you did in the off season might be helping you because it gave you some exposure to something else. So you touched on times. You touched a little bit on kind of how that looks like. Um, Take us inside and maybe talk about yourself in this too. Who were some of the stronger guys when you got into the weight room? How was some of that looked at? How were things grouped up? Maybe for fans who hear like, oh, we're in the morning group, we're in the afternoon group, or we're this coach, that coach. How was some of that put together when you guys were actually lifting some weights, doing some of the kind of indoor sort of performance stuff?
Yeah, so every summer when we would I think every summer, I take that back. 99 summer, we all ran. 99 summer, we lifted in the morning. So we had like four groups in the morning. So let's say there was a 6 o'clock group and then an 8, 9, 10.
Okay.
And then we ran in the afternoon. So there was like a 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, and then like a 4 o'clock, right? And maybe I'm off an hour or so. We never did that again after the 99 summer. 2000,
Hmm.
2001, and even 2002, my senior year when I didn't play, um, we did a 2 hour block. And so coach would have the freshmen come in at 6 o'clock group. And then the we were the first group, skill guys, receivers and DBs, and we would have a couple of stragglers of like running backs and backers or whatever. If their summer school schedule didn't allow them to go with their, let's say you had to take a 10 o'clock class to make up a grade, right? And your group was the 10 o'clock group, they would be with us. And that was, I always feel bad. I feel like Ronaldo was with us in the 2000 summer or 2001 summer, and I felt bad for him because he mainly had to do our times as a running back. So maybe that
Oh
helped
man.
him,
Sure.
but really
Yeah.
it was kicking his ass.
Tough.
But so anyway, 2 hour block, and we would, I think the 2000 summer we lifted first, and then we went to run after we lift. And then
Hmm.
the 2001 summer was the opposite. I think we ran first. We'd plyo, stretch, and so on and so forth, and then we do our running and conditioning, and then we would lift second. And the freshmen would be together. Then you'd have the receivers and DBs, you'd have the running backs and the backers, and then you'd have O line, D line, and they would obviously specialize based upon weight class or position group, what we would do. And so that in itself is important because if I started to fall behind, oh, by the way, we would have it in a 3 o'clock group, and that was like threes, fours, walk-ons, and I'm gonna explain that a little bit too because there was kind of some um, anyway, I'll get to that.
Okay.
So 5 groups a day, right? And the thing about, again, my experience I think was unique because we were all pretty damn similar. And I think the thing that always is interesting to me is you had Mark and Will. So Mark and Will stayed at receiver, or Intelio stayed at receiver, and then you had Jawan Rankins come in, you had Brandon Jones come in. I'm trying to think of the young guys who came in while we were still there. Those were probably the three that really made an impact. Rank, Willie P, and B Jones, and even them. We always felt like our freshman year, people thought we were phenomenal, and then I would say my sophomore year, I know we won the Natty and whatever, but like I always feel like we were treated like we always felt like we were being disrespected and we had a chip on our shoulder. We were all 5'11", 6 feet. Um, Dre was a legit 440, 438-ish type of guy. And Kurt had that. Kurt had it long speed, but in a 40, he couldn't run a 4.3 because his start wasn't
Yeah.
the best.
So bad. He's
Um,
one of the stiffest sprinters I've ever
yeah,
seen
yeah,
in my
yeah,
entire life.
100%. But as soon as he's going, like he can run by
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
Um, so we always had a chip on our shoulder, because you had like a Roy started to ascend to All American status, even like Trent, right? Trent got like all conference status as a tight end, you know. Rocky and T Marshall and Tommy. Well, the receiver core as a crew, it kind of was just like, oh, they called us the Fab Five as freshmen, and then by the time we were juniors, we were all just steady eddies, right? And you know, Twan, freshman year, I led us in catches and touchdowns. I had the most catches and most touchdowns as a freshman, 99 season. And then
Mm.
like 2000 season, I only caught like 30 balls and one touchdown. And I think Kurt had like 9 touchdowns. I think Kurt was a second
Yeah.
team all conference guy, 2000. And I'm off a little bit on his numbers. But like none of us never got like all conference or all American um even recognition. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
they always just kind of grouped us as a group, like, oh, that's the group.
They
And I
didn't.
think
Yeah.
I think about it now, we were all pretty like similar. Like you're asking me who was the stronger guys
Mm.
in the receiver group. There was Josh Norman, and
Yeah.
there were times where I was the strongest. And then there were times when Dre was the strongest. And then, by the way,
Nice.
Curtis was a strong mother sucker. Kurt was
Yeah.
strong, man. And so, we would go through, I was a 10-4 broad jump guy. And then Kurt would go 10-6. And then here comes Dre going 10-9. And here comes Savage, So like for us, it was always, and I would say our first 2 summers, week to week. And that's why during the seasons there was no true starter. Kurt and Savage, whoever had the better week started that week, right?
Mm.
And then with me, Dre and Jay Norm, it was interesting because I played X my freshman year, so I knew the position inside and out. But they wanted me to play slot because they wanted me to be more like a Brandon Daniels from the '99 season, and so
Sure.
they pegged me as a slot. But then Dre would have weeks where mentally he wouldn't be in the game. Mack, we need you to play X, and then Josh would have weeks where the matchup was just better than him for him at slot. So it was three of us playing two positions, and it just always put us in like there wasn't a guy who was going to play 80% of the snaps. That just wasn't our crew.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was too close and had their strengths. So when we get to the weight room, it was the same thing. But I will tell you this, and you asked me earlier, um, Roy was not. I would say and Roy, I don't know if Roy was probably the weakest safety in '99.
Really
Yes.
interesting. Okay.
Well, Roy didn't lift in high school.
That's
We'd
right.
be in the weight
That's
room in
right.
high school, and Roy would be sitting listening to his by the old school Walkman with the little, you know what I'm saying? He had a,
Hey.
the cassette tape Walkman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roy would do everything he could to not lift. But you know what? It was a blessing because Roy got his freshman All American accolades and such strictly on talent. By the 2000 summer, Schmidt started to recognize that Roy kind of did let OU his first year. He would kind of, sneak his way through. They caught him. And by his second year, like for instance, we would typically rep at 225. They started making Roy rep at 275. And max. And so when
Yeah.
Roy had to start maxing at 275 on bench, he knew, like, you saw how they would do their max today. They'd make a whole big thing out of it. You saw how they would post it
Sure.
on Twitter, and the guys were, it wasn't like that, but it was a big deal. Let's
Mm-hmm.
go. Everybody's excited. Da, da, da.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if Ante go up and do 275 14 times, and then JT go up and do 275 9 times, and then Book get up under there and do 275 4 times. Book probably was doing 225 to be honest with you. But then Roy is supposed to be a leader. Like Roy couldn't get on there and struggle and do 275 twice, right? So Roy was
Yeah.
a guy who
Yeah.
said, I can't do that. I need to work my ass off. And so because they put him in those higher weightlifting, his max, it made him work harder during summer. But I'll throw some
Man.
names at you. Let me throw some names at you.
Yeah. Go for it.
Receivers, Josh Norman. I mean, Josh was a running back, tight end, playing receiver, right? He was really a flex tight end
Sure.
for real. But all of us were pretty strong. All of us were 225, 10, at least 10. All of us broad jumped past 10. Me, Dre, and Kurt could 5 10 5 under 4.
Really.
Me and
Okay.
Dre were the fastest in the L drill. Dre, listen, Dre ran a freaking 6'3". It's the fastest I've ever seen in my life. A 6'3" in the L drill. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. And that's how
Man,
he goes from
he might have take 7 steps the whole daggum time, man.
I
He
was
was a
probably a
long guy.
6'8". Dre was as quick as me with longer limbs. Like
Yeah.
probably quicker than me. I don't know.
Yeah.
DBs. Ante Jones was cock diesel. JT Thatcher
Like I
was
said.
cock diesel.
Okay.
Tay was the strongest. Um, but JT was not a punk in the weight room. He was lazy, but he was not a punk. JT could lift, JT could squat, JT could clean. Roy became a competent, you know, in the box safety by I would say the end of the 2000 season or 2000
Hmm.
summer. Rocky was not strong. Rocky was a hard worker, and again, he was a guy like Roy who was not gonna punk out.
Yeah.
But the same way Rocky would struggle, Teddy would come and knock them things. Teddy would knock them things out. Russell Dennison would knock them things out. I mean, there were some backers who T Marshall. I mean, T Marshall was in another hemisphere from Rocky in terms of sheer talent. T Marshall's 2 years. Rocky get 2001 continued to get stronger and get a stronger base,
Hmm.
but Rocky was not a terribly strong guy. On the D line, I can't lie. Those D linemen, it's ridiculous how strong those guys were. I mean, they could throw 225 up like nobody's business. They squatted ridiculous. I mean, it was ridiculous to see some of the stuff they did. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you who pound for pound was the strongest every year. Take a stab at it.
Okay.
Offensive
Defensive
guy.
lineman or offensive guy?
No.
Oh,
Pound for
pound for
pound.
pound.
Pound for pound strongest on the team. Not even close. He could clean with the D lineman. He could squat with the D lineman. His bench was a little bit closer, but I think he was benching in the 275s, meaning
Pound for
275 for
pound.
reps.
Okay. Pound for pound. Strongest offensive player. Okay.
Player on the team.
Oh, just okay.
It
On
was
the
not Tommy.
team.
It was not Tommy Harris. And Tommy was
Pound
like
for
number two.
pound. Okay. The pound for pound makes me think it's a skill guy. Am I right?
Yes. And he holds an OU record. He was not a scrub. He was in fact he's an NFL guy.
Quentin Griffin.
Yes.
I had a feeling. Yeah. Yeah.
Q could squat like 600.
Yeah. I believe that. I believe that.
Q
100%.
could clean out of this world. His bench, he wasn't you know, he couldn't bench with Tommy and those guys, but he could throw 225 up over 20 for sure.
Yeah.
Q was an anomaly. And by the way, Q's another 5'10 guy, 5'10" guy below 4, L drill guy below 7. Q was legit.
Man. So that is that shows you how important that strength component is because when you are a squattier guy, right? A guy who's closer to the earth than everybody
Yeah.
else and trying to play a game where everybody's long and athletic, you have got to be able to put force into the ground and exert force on the earth better than the guy, even if it's just 6 feet, right? Your leverages are just better at that height. That's why a lot of athletes, or a lot of times when you're like looking at who's a potential scholarship, there's a reason why you want to see guys try to get to 5'11", 6 feet before you're like taking somebody serious for the most part. Otherwise, you've got to be an absolute killer. And if you're he was what, 5'6", right?
5'7", 5'7".
Oh, 5'7", 5'7".
He wasn't a midget. He was
Sure.
small.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, man, you have got to be so strong to deal with the contact, to deal with the physical side. Man, so um I want to ask you another question to follow that up. So I think it's a good time. Talk about kind of the pound for pound aspect of Quentin Griffin being an incredibly strong guy. What is one of the worst outings slash situations that you have seen in an OU summer
Mm.
or showed up? You're like, oh my gosh, man, like made you react or guys react or coaches react or just a general thought over the whole team of what was going on there or who is this guy. That worst situation or I don't want to say athlete, but just in general in the weight room slash on the field running. What's a story or an individual that comes to mind?
Hilarious. You gonna laugh because it's God how God works.
Okay.
How God works is amazing. So I gotta give you a little setup. This is a little context.
Okay.
Okay, Schmitty comes. Um, I think to a man, the entire team will tell you the sleds were the worst workouts we would have to do. They were just hell. I think guys like BMO and Roy and JT may not have hated them as much as us because they were just so strong through the hips, ass, and quads. And you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
once you get going, those guys, Roy was a killer on sleds, but everybody hated them because it was the you're running up a grass hill. There's divots, there's holes,
Oh,
there's probably like, you know what I'm saying, little gophers, whatever, right? There's all kind
yeah.
of riffraff going wrong.
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
And Schmitty's at the top of the hill, and I mean, I've seen some terrible stuff. In fact, I could use this same story for the hill, but I'm not. So you have that.
Okay.
We all hated the hill, but it was mental. If you and I felt like they felt sorry for us, so like they would give us chances because the hill. I saw the hill kill everybody. I've seen
Yeah.
everybody sprawled out like it's Hamburger Hill or something, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what this story is about. Okay, then you got ramps mental. Everybody can make it if you just don't punk out. You can make it. Stadium, same, hundreds, right? Hundreds, gassers. Those are things once you get in shape, you figure it out, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Schmitty, in our first 99 summer, we have to do 6 trippers. Well, not the 300-yard shuttle, 60-yard shuttle, where it's 50 yards 6 times, right? No, 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 no.
Yeah.
So 6 trippers became synonymous with the length of the field 6 times. So it's like an elongated gasser, but you got to touch 6 times, and you got to either touch every time with your right hand or you got to touch every time with your left hand. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And long story short, the first summer no one could do it. It was
Mm.
so bad. And by the way, we only had to do two in 99. So in 99, we had to make two. And the thing that made the drill so hard is, let's say, I want to say our time was like a minute and 30. I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was something like a minute and 30. And for us, we had to learn how to push to the line, sink, touch, kind of like it's like a squat. Push to the line, sink, touch, and then like push out.
Yeah.
Because if you ran all the way to the line, stopped, touched the line, got up, and then turned, and then took a step, you wasted 3 steps.
You're
And
losing.
on
Yeah.
6 of those trips, you're losing 15 seconds, right? So summer 99, we can't make it. Two of them. Everybody can make one. And then you get like 30 seconds, and we're like, bro, we're not ready. And the second one, we couldn't make it. We had a guy named Moses Washington. He was a quarter miler, an 800-meter runner for the track team. He played at Carroll City High School in Miami. He was a really good high school player. In fact, he was a good player for us. He never made it onto the starting DBs, but he was always on the cusp. And Mo's a good friend of mine to this day. Mo can make it. He's the only guy who can make
Okay.
it.
Okay.
And he was a all Big 12 caliber guy running the 800. He was the only guy
Sure.
who could make it. Mike T couldn't even make it. Michael Jackson
Yeah.
couldn't make it. And he's a track guy, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, we figure it out. And what I think happens is he gives us 15 seconds more break. And then what he did in 99 is he let us pick the hand. So sometimes you can run and use this hand. So like if I'm running to this side, I use my right hand. If I'm running to this side, I use
Sure.
my left hand, and it helps. All right. Well, 2000 summer, um, he Smitty calls us out. I remember like it's yesterday. All right, guys, we're gonna do trippers. So we're all looking at each other like, okay, we're prepared. We're like, okay, we gotta do, but we know they hurt. Um, but we're gonna do 4 quarters. So we're like, okay, so does that mean like we're gonna run one and then it's halftime, and then we're gonna run another one and the game's over? And
Yeah.
we're running four. We're like, oh
Oh man.
shit. So we like, okay, we got so 2000 summer, we went from two 6 trippers to four six trippers. Well,
Oof.
here's the deal. It's just like anything else, and this is why I say this is why we were a kick-ass team. We figured it out. We figured it out, right? So
Figured it out.
it probably took 3 weeks, and Schmitty knew how to deliver it to us better in 2000. I think he gave us like a minute break because we had four, and then I think he even gave us like a minute and a half after the second one, right? So that rest really helped us, and then we knew how to run it because we learned how to run two of them, right? So we knew you had to get it, jump into the cuts, jump into the cuts. Okay, well, about halfway through summer, he's like, okay, man, we're doing 8 trippers. And we're like, what? So he was like, we're not doing 6 trips at 100 yards. We're doing 8 trips at 80 yards. And I'm doing the math. Like, the math don't math. It's longer and it's more change of directions.
Yep, yep.
And so but long story short, guys like Dre, myself, we were just, we were just so mentally strong and good athletes that we could do it. Well, so the first day we had to do it, he tells us, and Schmitty, he knew who to get it pumped up because he knew everybody would follow. So again, DMack, Dre, because he knew like anything we did, I'm giving my best effort, and generally my best effort was enough to always make my time and a lot of times win. If it was a quickness thing, like I could probably win. Otherwise, I'm making my time, right? So he would get like me, Dre, D Straight was one of those guys, Book was one of those guys. Rocky was one of those guys. Teddy, 2001 or 2000, he was there in 2000. Teddy was one of those. So he knew,
Okay.
like, come on, DMack, you're not. And then he knew if me and Dre going, Kurt ain't gonna be the one who ain't going. You know what I'm saying? Like he knew how to do that.
Yeah.
So receivers and DBs go. Long
Okay.
story short, we make it. We're all like, hell yeah. Listen, I wish I could convey onto you how shitty it felt to do these workouts. Like I can't articulate the hell you're in when you're on the third one, right?
Oh
Like
man.
halftime is ending,
Yeah.
and then you hear Schmitty say, hand down. Like that was a nightmare for me for a decade. Hand down. So boom, you put your hand down and you're in the middle of the third one and you're on
Yeah.
like the fifth tripper and your legs are cramping. And then your brain, you know what your brain's telling you? This is my brain saying, DMack, you got a whole nother one to do after you
Oh
finish this one.
yeah.
And
Oh
it's
my
just like
God.
you want to quit, right? You just want to
Yeah,
quit.
yeah,
And you just
yeah.
like, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit.
Yeah.
But anyway, long story short, we made it. And like I'm sure everybody didn't make it, but like most of us made it, right? And we're the
Okay.
10 o'clock group. And 2000 summer, we lifted first and then we would run. So our day
Okay.
was done. And
Yep.
I think it was a Tuesday. So we had Wednesday off. So we're like Barry, we were so happy.
Hell
And
yeah.
it's crazy because I was in good enough shape to not just be sprawled out for an hour. If it was the hill, I wouldn't have left for an hour. I would just been laying looking at the sky because the hill
Yeah.
obliterates you.
Wipes you.
But the next group is receiver. Oh no, running backs and backers. And I never said this, but quarterbacks went with running backs and backers. Okay,
Okay.
so that's the next group. And so Jay Hunt ran with us because he had a class, and Jay Hunt made it. Me, Jay Hunt, and Roy are roommates, and we're like, I don't think they're ready for this. So we finish. They go in the weight room first. We go home. We're at home and we're sitting on our couch and we're like, let's go back up there. We're like, I want to see them run. So we're at the crib. It's been an hour or something. Barry,
Okay.
we drive back. We walk through the locker room. We walk through the locker room up to the practice fields, and they're running. They're already running them, and
Okay.
we're like, damn, this is fast, right? And I think they're on the third one. So we're walking. The hills are when you walk at the back in the day when you walked up the locker room, the practice fields were probably about 8 feet above the entrance from the locker room. So you had to just walk up. It
Okay.
was gradual. It was gradual.
Sure.
It wasn't a big deal, but the fields were elevated. So we're walking and we can just see like four dudes. They're running, but like half the crew isn't running. They're already just sprawled out.
Okay.
And then so we're looking and I'm like, what the hell is that? And I see what looks to be like I don't want to say his name yet, but it looks like Bambi. If you watch the cartoon Bambi when he couldn't walk yet and he was like fumbling, stumbling,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
we see it's a captain and he's like it looked terrible. Well, so we're walking and we're like, he ain't gonna make it. And it's the third one. It's the third one. So he makes it. And then
Okay.
so we're walking, walking, walking. I'll just go ahead and say T Marshall is on the side, and T Marshall shaking his head like this shit ain't worth it. Like I ain't doing this shit no more. So you got T Marshall. He already quit after the second one.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so we get there, and I guess they finished their fourth one. And the person who looks like Bambi is Josh Heupel. The thing I respected about Hype is he didn't
Wow.
quit. The thing that will always
Wow.
go down in history about Hype is he looked like a. I can't even explain how terrible his form was, his face was, how slow he was running. He did not make his
Oh
time.
man.
Listen, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is we look on the floor and my little bro, man, Quinn Griffin is crucified. So they finish, and this is how bad they did. If you don't make your time and you're a leader, I missed my time one time in my entire
Okay.
career.
Okay.
And it was the sled, it was the hills with the sleds. Coach Schmidt cussed me out. He kicked me out the drill. Get the F out of here, DMack. This is BS. You're supposed to be a leader. When you miss the times, they miss their times. Get out of here, you mother. I mean, he giving me the and I gotta leave. And I couldn't come back for a week. I was pissed. Ooh, he made me do 6 trippers to get back. Well, T Marshall quit. I mean, he didn't make it.
Sure.
Quentin Griffin is on the ground, crucified on the cross. Josh Heupel is running like he's Bambi, and Seth Latro. No. Seth Latro made it. Seth
Okay.
made it.
I can see that. Okay.
Seth made it,
Okay.
right? So he can't. He like it wasn't one of the ones. Schmidt thought I was dogging it. I wasn't. I'm not good at the hill, and I think I had one with more weight on it. It was hard for me, right?
Yeah.
He had he had sympathy for these guys. Like we
Oh
were,
my gosh.
he was like, "Can somebody please pick up Q? Q, are you okay?" Q is on the ground. You know those cartoons where they have X's over their eyes, like Q. We thought Q was me, and so look, none of us helped them. Me, Roy, and Jay, we didn't help them because like,
Oh
nah,
my
y'all,
God.
y'all gotta do this. Y'all gotta go through the
Deal with
same
it.
shit we went. And they had a group. It was like 15 of them. I'm not
Sure.
naming everybody, but
Yeah.
literally, Q couldn't get up. They had to carry him like like he was the cross that Christ that Christ bore. And one guy on one side, somebody else on the other side. They carried him into the locker room. His feet dragged the entire floor.
Holy cow.
Josh Heupel couldn't walk. Josh is done. Josh is like, I can't move. To come back and get hype. Listen, we were just like, oh my God. And needless to say, we never ran 8 trippers
Oh
again.
my
we,
God.
we never ran 8 trippers again. Yeah. So
Not
the
great.
running backs,
Not great.
by the way, I don't think Rocky made it. If Rocky hears this, he could probably advocate for himself, but I don't think Rocky made
Oh.
it. I think because
Whew.
you'll know this because you're a strength guy.
Yeah.
The change of direction part, when you're tired
Yeah.
and you just
It's a
ran
factor.
95 yards and you've got to touch it with your hand. So you've got to, it's a squat, it's a
Yeah.
reach, and then you got to put because if you like um if anybody who's listening to this says that doesn't make sense, when you're that tired, Barry, I would see guys, true story. Like this is how tired guys were. They would run to the line, standing up, and
Yeah.
turn around standing up and just fall down and touch it with their hand and
Like
start
a
running
toe
again.
touch and and start going. Yeah. Like literally.
It
Yeah.
like because your body's breaking down
Yeah.
and you're like, I gotta bend at the waist, I gotta sink, I gotta touch it, I gotta explode.
Yeah.
Oh, guys
Yeah.
were it was debilitating. And so those 8 trippers went away. We never did eight. I think he tried them one time, and I think there were
Uh-huh.
enough leaders who they just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
T Marshall quit after two, which I think T Marshall was never a guy who he gonna make all his times. T Marshall will get fired up and make them. T Marshall gonna miss some
Yeah.
times too. He was like a Roy. Roy was never a guy who was gonna make all his times. He was a big,
Yeah.
strong, thick guy. He had to run like us. Um, but Q, we always say he died on the cross that day. They carried that brother
That
in.
is
I felt so. Josh
hilarious.
Heupel looked like a teenage girl trying to
Oh
run
man.
the mile who had never run a 400 in her life. Like Josh, I can't
Yeah.
explain to you how he just looks so awkward, but Josh would not quit. We
Oh
always
man.
respected. And yeah, man, to see all of these like impact, and I think Seth made it, but he was like, "This is crazy. What the hell?" Trent, I think Trent made it.
Yeah.
Hambone, I think Hambone was laid out for the count. About half the crew couldn't make it, and we got a good laugh there. In our crew, most I think Kurt maybe like Kurt and Roy may have been,
Sure.
and Jay Norm. Jay Norm and Roy definitely remember six strippers the same way some of us remember sleds. Jay Norm and Roy could kill sleds. Jay Norm and Roy hated six strippers. So
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Some guys are just like more like concentric. They're just stronger guys. So that stuff isn't um especially in their lower half, just their ability to kind of deal with pulling mass and moving mass
yeah,
is
yeah,
just
yeah,
different.
yeah.
Man, sometimes drills, and we'll probably end it right there and pick up in part three next time. Sometimes drills, especially too when you're trying to program as a strength coach and you're trying to figure out ways in which we can push, ways in which we can still keep guys safe. Man, sometimes a drill just isn't worth that. What we say is the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yep.
Like it's just not. You're not getting enough out of it and the risk of injury is too high. And to me, that when you say like we never did that again, to me that screams of this was a concept, this was an idea, this was something they brought to the table. They attempted it. They looked at the overall net value because ideally, so if a drill is really good, ideally there should be some objective kind of predictions that you should be able to make some predictions about who's going to do well, who's not. And then that stuff should, for the most part, kind of hold true. Obviously, you got a guy who might take a drill off or whatever, but for the most part, the numbers should bear out. Or did our better guys or guys who normally do this stuff well, did they solve the problem? Did they solve the equation and get to the end? Did the guys who normally don't do it? And you're evaluating, you're also watching how people are moving, right? And if it's just too much, it's too much. And occasionally, man, you got ones that are a miss like that. And then I bet you he didn't like open. They might have talked about it as a crew, like, hey man, but they probably didn't openly come to you guys and be like, guys, never doing that again.
No, we
Apologies.
no no. They never said that. Hell no. We never heard that. We just didn't do it again.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. They never
yeah,
told us.
yeah.
That's
That's
yeah.
crazy.
It's it's funny you say that.
Yeah,
Um, that's absolutely how things played out. So I told you about the ramps, and it just brought to mind the first time we ran the ramps. They had no context of what our time would be. So I
yeah.
want to say our time was like 48. And we
Okay.
were all done, like, oh man, that was easy. Let's go. And then we came back. No, 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 no. We were the first group to do it. And our let's just say
Uh,
I don't remember what our time was, but let's just say it was a 48.
okay.
When the running backs and tight ends and backers went, their time was like 40. So it gave you, so
Yeah.
because we went first that summer. We were the first group outside of the freshmen, and so
Mm-hmm.
the first time we ever did ramps, I remember I was like, oh, that was easy, and we were like, that's it. And Coach Schmidt was kind of like, yeah, that's it. We were like, hell yeah. So we would always text each other because the next group would be like, what y'all do, what y'all do. We all wanted to know, like, to get our minds right, because they would
Yeah.
never tell you, bro. You never knew what you were gonna do. It was always like, oh my god, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? So you try to get as much detail from the groups before, but we were
Interesting.
like, oh man, you guys got rims. I was like, we told them like, oh, it's an easy day. Like, yeah, we have 48. And then you get the running backs come back like, bro, we have 40. And then we come back the next time and we had 36. Right? Like, oh, what happened to 48? So it was you could tell that when they would incorporate new aspects to the training program, especially the first few weeks, right?
Yeah.
They were trying to get a test for, what we could do. And so to hear you say that, I'm like, yeah, that's actually correct, right? This in the weight room, generally it was pretty
You
fine
you
too.
know. Yeah, you know. Yeah.
But when we would introduce new we never did ramps in '99. Ramps was
Yeah.
something they introduced in 2000.
Hmm.
That first time we did it, we loved it. We're like, oh man, we like ramps. When we had to come back and do 36 4 times, and then I
Yeah.
came back the next week, and that mother sucker said 35. I was like, oh my god.
Yep.
So you're
Yeah.
nail on the head, brother. Nail on the head.
Yeah, that's man, and I want to get before we get out of here, I think there's something to be said too about the psychology of this. So this obviously isn't like my lane, but I am aware like you learn about the psychology of sport. And a lot of people, when they think of home field advantage, they think of the crowd. They think of the maybe the crown on the field. Maybe it's like how the wind swirls in the stadium. But a lot of times too, there is this thing where the reason you as a coach integrate so much of the program aspects, right? The stadium, the ramps, like the actual structures of where you reside as a team. The reason you integrate that is and just figure out a way to make it that figure out what the metrics need to be and then go from there is that when another team comes into your house, quote unquote, they don't know the work that has been done there. They don't, yes,
Mm,
the crowd's gonna be loud, but there is some pride and like you remember when we did that over there, and you're not saying this out loud, but this is a mental thing of I know what I did, and there's no way this guy across from me could have held check with what I was doing. And that is the piece when you go into a fourth quarter, to start a game, right? And people would look back at those teams and say that was where a lot of games, you saw a Sooner team that was fresh, that was ready to go, that was just more conditioned than the other team. So much of it is that, right? That home field advantage is built in you kind of having to navigate and figure out tough crap at every nook and cranny, every corner of that venue that you're a part of. And there is a real psychological component to that is outside of the crowd's not helping you play the game, right? They might give you some energy at different times, but a lot of times when you're in the middle of a snap, you're not hearing the crowd, right? But the work you put in over the summer and your confidence going, into the third quarter, your confidence going into the fourth quarter, that 2 minute drive, the work and the confidence you built up in yourself by nailing those drills down, right? And then the guys coming after you who are saying, man, I didn't do it this year, but next year I'm going to do that. And then they develop that same kind of pride. And then that is hopefully, ideally, how you build a program. And that is why experience in that field and why the same guys tend to succeed is they've nailed like a Schmidt, a Moffitt, right? Guys who Cochran at Bama and then Georgia. There was a reason why Georgia started dominating football games and why Alabama, yes, there was an athlete change, but Alabama had a really good strength coach who followed Kirby eventually to Georgia,
yeah,
and it made an impact. So
yeah.
so much of that is psychological. Um,
Let me say something. Let me say something.
go ahead, go ahead.
We leveraged that on the road. What you
Interesting.
just ex-
Talk about that.
what you just explained is College Station 2000 season. What you just
Mm,
explained is Manhattan 2000 season. What you just explained is Arrowhead Stadium. It's 100% back in the day when it was called Pro Player Stadium, which is where we played
yeah,
for the Natty. Listen, we would literally out. I think the best example is College Station. We're losing. By the way, they're kicking our ass. On offense, we keep making silly mistakes. On defense, they can't stop Robert Ferguson and Jamar Toombs. I think his name's Jamar Toombs. They can't stop him.
Jamar Toombs. Yeah,
But Ferguson was the guy. He was cooking everybody. Ferguson was amazing that day. And um, you know, we make a big play, or maybe we have a turnover, or maybe I have a drop. I don't remember, but we're coming off the field And I'll just never forget T Marshall. DMack, you work too hard for this shit, DMack. Hell no, nah, we not, and it just took me to a place like, nah, we did. We put
Yeah.
everything on the line. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then we're on the bench and Ferguson runs a corner or a stop fade or something, and he catches the ball on our sideline amongst like four defensive players. And we're like, hell no, come on, Roy Lee. Oh, OJ, what's up? Like, we put too much work. And I just remember, right?
Interesting.
I think I said this on one of the pods earlier, but I just remember like, nah, we're gonna find a way to win. And I remember
Mm,
Bob going across. Y'all ready to go? Y'all ready, Coach? We in. We listen. We gonna make it happen. And I just remember us going to the field and the defense like, let's go. Y'all make a play. We make a play. Y'all make a play. We make a play. And I remember like, yo, y'all remember them six trippers? Y'all don't remember them sled? Like those were
man.
the actual sayings that we were having to say to one another in that game. That was the hardest game of the season. That was the
Wow.
hardest game. I know I say K-State was the toughest place to play. By the way, K-State
Sure.
they were just as good as us. K-State was damn good, man. They had NFL dudes all throughout the roster. You know, what's the kid that played for the Cowboys? It was a corner.
Oh, Newman,
Uh
Terrence Newman.
he was third team, or he was the third receiver. He was the third DB. Jeremitrius Butler
Wow.
played for the Los Angeles Rams for 7 or 8 years, started
Yeah.
in the league. Dyshot Carter played for the Green, not the Green. He paid for the Denver Broncos. He was actually, I think, the kid's from Colorado. They had John McGraw, who played 8 to 10 years for the
Yeah.
Eagles, and they had Cooper, who played for the Raiders, and like that was their secondary. Their
Yeah.
backers were Semino, Kelly. Like they had Fada Fahey, who played for years for the
Forever.
Pittsburgh Steelers. They
Yeah.
had NFL dudes. Then they had Quincy Morgan, and they had Lockett, and they had, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
K
Yeah.
State was legit.
They
They
were
were
real,
better than
real
Florida
deal.
State. And as far as I'm concerned, they were better than Florida State. But that A&M game, man, that
Yeah.
was the game where like we were supposed to lose that game. And
Mm.
and if someone were to ask me, where I want to tie this back to summer, Barry, Jerry Schmidt is the reason we won that game. 100%. And it's crazy as we have this conversation, and it brings me back to all the psychology. You said something, I said, God dang, I never even thought about that. I never even considered when we were in summers that the coaches would be leveraging Schmitty to figure out who could navigate his workouts. You know what I'm saying? Like I never
Yeah.
even can, like we were just every day. It was like, okay, I'm either gonna make it or I'm gonna die. Like that's how we looked at it. And then week 6, 7, and 8, and we'll talk about that probably next week. Excuse
Yeah.
me. Like we were in such good shape. We were like, Schmitty, what's the time? Like we were truly 6, 7, and 8. Schmitty be like, time is 30, 35. Schmitty, I'm running a 34. Like we'll be like, I'm running a 34. And we'll like we started to get that level of confidence. But like that A&M game, like bro, we were supposed to lose that game. Sooner Magic and that off-season preparation and that culture that was that. By the way, that was not, with all love for Bob. Bob was amazing. I will always show love to Bob Stoops. That was Jerry Schmidt. Like
Man.
that is the signature of Jerry Schmidt. Going through those summers, not knowing the workout, not knowing your time, right? Hey Mackey, if I throw this at you, will you make it happen? He would, if you had a bad rep in the weight room, that don't count. Start over.
Yeah.
And that is the standard. That's why
Mm.
you win games you're supposed to lose.
Man. That is fascinating because that is a tangible impact
Yep.
that you're talking about. That is not like some esoteric thing you can't really grab.
Yep.
That was a tangible effect on a game, right? It's a big piece, man. It's a reason why, college coaches, guys who take over head coaching jobs, will often say that hire is one of their most important hires. And of course, we've talked about it. I've talked about it, previous regime. We ain't going to do that. But I'll tell you what, one place that is setting the bar is the Barry and Mack show
Let's get
over
it.
here on OU Insider. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in for this series. Part 2 is in the books. As we dive in, we're going to go next episode get into we'll stay a little bit in the meat of things, but we're going to start talking about how we transition to fall, what that looks like. Who are the guys who showed out in the summer? How do coaches where we move more to the football side, how are coaches looking at things and going, you know what? This could be a group that is going to, be a factor for us on game day. These are guys who are going to be factors for us in fall who we need to look at. Who did we not consider at the start of summer that now we got to say, this guy got through? Or who is a guy who maybe was ballyhooed, maybe a guy who we expected to have a good summer, but dogged it. What does that look like? DMack, any closing thoughts before we get out of here today, man?
Yeah, man, 80% of summer was Smitty, but the other 20% were those 7-on-7s. And I'm not going to spill the beans, but fights. I'm talking about fist fights. I'm talking about guys who literally mentally quit because they got out physical 101s in summer. There ain't no coaches. You know what I'm saying? Ain't no
Yeah.
referees. So we're gonna really dive into the other aspect of summer, which are the the position groups doing their stuff. Like we always worked with hype. I kind of alluded to it the first one. I'll go into more details about what that looked like. And then Skelly, man, and I said it before, me and Roy were not friends during season. Like both of us took that and that's my best friend. Like I elementary school, middle school, high school, college, life. Talk to him today. We spoke today. During season, we're off season mainly. It was you know what I'm saying? Like he coming for my
Yeah,
lunch, I'm coming for his lunch. And in summertime with no coaches and no referees, and we got one-on-ones in Skelly,
man.
make a man out of you or a punk.
Man, stay tuned, Sooner Nation. It is going to be fantastic stuff. Make sure to go listen to us everywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us over there on OU Insider. We're posting over there on the board, interacting with everybody. Go grab yourself a membership, ouinsider.com. Thank you all for tuning in today. We will see you soon.